All right, guys. Our guest tonight is former TNA World Heavyweight Champion Magnus. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me on, gentlemen.
Nah, no problem. Listen, okay, let's get we got to talk about the elephant in the room. You suffered a tough loss at the hands of Eric Young on April 10th, the addition of Impact Wrestling. You will inevitably get your rematch at Sacrifice, maybe this week or at Sacrifice, we're unsure, but soon enough. What are your feelings as you attempt to get the title back for the first time?
Well, it's a different story once you've tasted the success of being champion. It doesn't dull the senses. It doesn't make you want it any less. I promise you that. In fact, if anything, it probably if you're anything like me, it just makes you want it even more. So I'm looking forward to locking up with EY again. And I know a lot of people were surprised at the outcome, but then it's nice to be able to surprise people from time to time. And I think that the viewing figures, and the viewing figures all through my reign as champion can point to the fact that perhaps people are just interested in what we're doing now, and it's building and it's fresh and exciting. And if I can be a small part of that, and I've been a small part of that as the champion, then great. And honestly, it's never fun to lose the championship, but at the same time, this is a business, and we're in this to generate interest in what we're doing, and if we can do business and do some good business, then that's what it's all about, and that's a very satisfying thing. So I'm looking forward to doing it some more. And EY is he's a great competitor, and he has, in a lot of ways, has had to really wait his turn, and has got the crappy end of the stick many times over the years through different regimes with this company, and in terms of being overlooked as a great talent and stuff like that. So I was glad that he was able to be portrayed in the right light, and I was able to get him where he needs to be. And I think that I'm sure there are a lot of criticisms against me for different things, like there is against anyone, especially when they become a top guy. But I think that one thing that no one can deny is that while I've been on top, that anyone who's been in there with me has come out looking better out the other end of it.
Mike Chiari?
Magnus, TNA seems to be in the midst of a youth movement with a lot of the younger talent being brought in and pushed. And your role in that, I think, is pretty interesting because you're only 27 years old, but at the same time, you've been with the company since 2008. So with that said, how do you view your status within TNA? Do you identify more with the young guys or with the veterans?
I love this youth movement thing. It's like a brand in and itself. We must be the ninth or 10th person I've done interviews with in the last 3 or 4 months that have used that exact phrase. And I find it humorous. I actually wrote about it in my last column for FSM that a group of guys, predominantly in their late 20s, some in their early 30s, can be described as a youth movement. I think because in any other genre, especially sports, that would not be considered a youth movement at all. But in pro wrestling, obviously we play by a slightly different set of rules. But I think that actually speaks more to the mentality of wrestling fans, or certainly the mentality of wrestling fans who perhaps overanalyze things a bit, or somehow think that their opinion is more valuable than any other fan. Because I think that the reality of the situation is that The Rock was on top in WWF as it was at the time at 27. Triple H was certainly moving into the upper echelon as he got into his late 20s, and I could go back and point to no end of guys who went on to become icons in the business, like the last two names I just mentioned, who all reached that level in their late 20s, because I think that that's the time when when people are sort of gravitating to them. But for some reason now, it seems to be more of an important thing to identify the fact, like their age. That's something I've had to deal with my entire career, because I got picked up young and sort of So then you're immediately, in addition to the fact that, I'm 6'4" and 250, and, so it's almost like a curse these days to have that look, because it's almost like the opposite of not having the right look back in the day, is the fact that now, like, you look a certain way, or you have a certain background, and suddenly, it doesn't matter whether you go out and have a good match or not. Like, it's, oh, he can't do this, he can't do that, he's, overrated. That's another great one that gets thrown around a lot. But I don't, to answer your question, I think that I just relate to, I think that in the business, it's like you gravitate to whoever you're on the same kind of plateau with, and I mean that in terms of like mindset, not like a level or anything like that, because there's certainly very little of that kind of thing goes on in TNA as far as like, there is a real sort of team kind of feel to everything. Everybody just kind of gets along, and everyone sort of is treated equally. But I can say I can take pride in the fact that I spoke up many times for Samuel Shaw, I should say. I don't want him to abduct me and throw me in the back of a van. I spoke up many times for Sam. We've known each other for a long time. And I've also been, a huge fan of Robbie and Jesse's work. I think Robbie is easily the most underrated talent, on our roster. I think EC3 is doing great. Spud's been doing great, and I think if anything, they're all friends of mine. But then I also have a huge amount of affection and respect for Joe, and for Bobby and James, and for and AJ when he was there, and no end of guys like EY, as well. And Abyss, I think that that he's the other guy who we often sort of take for granted, but he actually, he wears a lot of hats in the company. He helps out with a lot of stuff behind the scenes, as well as being a great talent on screen, and always delivers and always works hard and always has an awesome attitude. So, like, really, I believe in a good mix of veterans, guys in their prime, and youth. But to me, it's like your age shouldn't define you. Your age shouldn't put you in one of those categories. Your work should put you in one of those categories. So if you happen to be young and they happen to think that you're ready to be a top guy, that doesn't mean that they're changing their whole philosophy. That just means that you, in particular, have proven yourself in one way or another. And I think that people sometimes are too quick to analyze every decision, and take it to mean more than it really is. But the reality is that we're all judged on merit, and that's the way that it should be.
BG?
Yeah, Magnus, although you didn't win the title in Europe, TNA quickly embarked on a European tour while you were champion. Can you explain to us how important this tour was for you, as you were the ambassador for TNA as a champion while being in Europe?
I think, those tours are always important to us, because obviously we do great business over there. And it was a tough schedule this time, because we had so many TVs to do. So that, that in itself was, I don't look at it like, I don't think that there was any more pressure put on me by anybody in particular, as in like, oh, you really have to deliver because you're the champion now, and da-da-da. I think that's just one of those things where when it's decided that you'll be champion, that goes without saying. I put pressure on myself to make sure that I was a strong enough villain, that we did the right business when we went over there, and I was glad that we did, because I certainly didn't want, especially so quickly into my run as a heel with the title, I certainly didn't want to ruin that with positive reaction. So I was very pleased with that from a business standpoint. It's amazing to me that people have asked me a lot, like, oh man, like, he got booed when he went to England, like, that sucks. And it's like, no, it doesn't. It's fantastic. That's our job. The year before, I was there and got arguably the biggest babyface reaction on the show. And if you don't believe me, go back and watch it. And then this time I went out and got arguably the biggest heel reaction. So, in terms of work, like that's the best you can hope for. That's me doing my job correctly. I will argue this point to the death with quote unquote smart fans who often tend to point the finger at certain talents who are perceived to be, the best workers or the people with the best work rate. And I will argue this point to the death that if their job is to go out and get people to dislike them, and then they do a load of stuff that makes people cheer or laugh or clap, that's not doing their job correctly. And the same way that, if your job is to get people to like you and they boo you, then that's not really doing your job correctly either. But, there are fans who are going to go out of their way to go against the grain. And obviously we see that more and more, as the business progresses. But overall, you have to try and find a common ground in your work to get the desired reaction out of not only the fans who are going to try and go against the grain, but also, the traditional fans who are just, who still make up the majority of our audience. So I was happy that I was able to get a uniform response from everybody, regardless of where they fell in that bracket.
Okay, well, listen, from a storyline point of view, getting booed in Europe was perfect, was exactly what you guys were going for. But your victory in December was the first major American Wrestling Championship for an English superstar in the 108-year history of the sport. As an English star and doing that, then immediately going to your home country, talk to us about what that win meant to you and what that whole tour meant to you. I know you wanted to be booed, but like from a personal point of view, how was it to win?
It does mean a lot. And it did mean a lot, when I went back to England and did a lot of media, and I was genuinely overwhelmed by the response from the media for the fact that I was the first Brit to win a recognized world championship. I didn't honestly really ever think of it until it happened, just because I always assumed that somebody would get there before me, because there's been so many great talents that have come out of Britain before me that I just was sort of like thinking that someone else will get the strap before I do. So when but the circumstances were such that it was me, and that's something that no matter what, that will always be something I can look back on, which is great. And and it was absolutely. I do remember thinking to myself, I'm walking into Wembley Arena today as the world champion, and it's my, and I have a responsibility, to deliver and be, and be the top guy. Same thing when I was in Manchester and in Glasgow and Dublin and Birmingham. So it was very cool, and a very proud moment for me. Yeah.
The last two questions, Mike. Are you first?
Yeah, Magnus, you were very much on the rise leading up to Bound for Glory last year, and I think most fans would probably agree that facing and beating a legend like Sting was huge in terms of cementing your legitimacy. So, knowing how much that rivalry probably helped your career, would you like to see Sting back with TNA at some point, if that's at all possible?
I mean, I'm as grateful to Sting as anybody in the wrestling business for the benefit that he's had on my career. And Steve is a great guy and very, very smart and just such a model citizen, as far as like the way he conducts himself and how much respect he commands. There are some people who seem to be obsessed with respect and seem to be obsessed with guys not showing them enough respect. But Sting is a guy who has never had to pull any stunts, has never had to bully anyone, has never had to throw his weight around or pull rank. He commands respect. And, the same can be said about Kurt Angle and others. But Steve, to me, working with him was a pleasure every time, especially at San Diego. And he, not just for the fact that obviously I got to be on that sort of level of stage and spotlight, but also the fact that he, trusted me a lot to defer a lot of it to me, and every time we've worked together, whether it be promos or in a match or anything, he's always, deferred to me a lot and said, "What do you think? Like I want to know what you think we should do here, and and then I'm going to trust you on this because I think that you'll be right, and that goes a long way, and it certainly goes it goes a long way with the other talent too. I remember distinctly kind of being with him during the day in San Diego and was going through a couple of different scenarios, and we brought Kurt over to kind of to bounce some things off of him, and then that was when Steve went, he goes, I think I want you to beat me with a submission. He goes, we can do it all these other ways. He goes, but the way this is laying out to me, I want you to get me with the cloverleaf in the middle, and I want to submit. And I just kind of sat there and said, okay, that's a tremendous thing to do for me. So I appreciate it. And we said a couple more things, and he said, okay, I'm going to go get a cup of coffee or whatever, and walked away. And Kurt was just sitting there looking at me and just was like, did he just say that? Like, what just happened here? And I don't know. Yeah, I guess, and it was just one of those things. And he goes, wow, like, he goes, he's never even done that for me. And I was just like, well, that's the kind of guy that Sting has been to me. So obviously, when you have that kind of, level of relationship and admiration for somebody, obviously I would always love to see him back. And, he's over to a degree that is, very, very rare in this business. So, from a business standpoint, yeah, of course, I'd love to have him back anytime.
BG, last question?
Yeah, Magnus, while TNA was overseas a couple months ago, they announced another European tour for 2015. I'm just wondering if you think TNA and other American-based promotions should tour Europe more often, or do the infrequent tours help keep those trips fresh for fans and the talent?
That's an interesting question. I think that we have, internally we've had that conversation a lot of us, the boys, have had that discussion. I personally think that you do have to be cognizant of oversaturating. But I also think that there's probably room for a second tour for us in a year, perhaps working at smaller venues, and doing a more intimate kind of show. I don't think that would oversaturate. I don't think that would kill our arena business. And the thing that a lot of people don't realize, especially Americans, about the UK is that just because it's a small country geographically, it's very, very densely populated, and there are still a lot of towns within the towns that we hit. So we hit, like this time, what did we hit? We hit Dublin, which isn't the UK, it's Ireland, but we hit Dublin, Glasgow, Birmingham, Manchester, and London, and they're all major markets. But there are so many, towns, particularly sort of coastal towns, to like down on the sort of on the west coast. You've got places like Bristol and places like that, and then on the south coast you've got towns like Portsmouth, which are always great wrestling towns, and Brighton and Worthing and places like that. And then where I was born and raised, Norfolk out on the east, East Anglia or East Coast, all of those places, to get to any of those big towns that we run the arena shows at is at least like a 4 or 5 hour drive. And to Brits, that's a significant thing. It's not like America where like a 4 or 5 hour drive isn't as big a deal. So it's like I think that there is potential there for us to run a secondary tour at like at sort of smaller markets, kind of. I don't want to disrespect them by calling them B towns, but like a B town type of run. But in the UK and in Europe.
Okay, listen, Magnus, you got a Sacrifice on April 27th coming up. Please tell the fans where they can find more of you, your merchandise, and all that stuff.
Well, you can follow me on Twitter at Magnus Official. My own website, which is currently under reconstruction, but will be up again very, very soon, is nickaldis.com, NICKALDIS.com. You can get all my merch and stuff like that on there, including, it won't be till the end of the year, but I have a fitness book due for, that I just signed a publishing deal on, which will be due for release towards the end of the year, so keep an eye out for that. And, there's contact forms on there for people to contact me for appearances and stuff like that. Or you can go through my Twitter, like I said, at Magnus Official.
Okay, we appreciate the time, Magnus, and thanks for coming on the show, man.
No worries. Thanks for having me on, guys.